Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to the NBA Trade Zone podcast, where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, future. Hi, guys. I'm Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today with us is a special guest, one of our old former coworkers and a good friend who decided to leave teaching and join the corporate world, but we're still going to be able to hear him out today. We're going to introduce him, Daniel Fisher.
Hi guys, I'm happy to be here.
Daniel's from Milwaukee and came into town from Milwaukee and wanted to do a special episode about the Milwaukee Bucks and discuss essentially what are the best ways for Milwaukee to assure that Giannis stays in Milwaukee past this contract when it expires in a couple of years. So we're going to go over some ways, specifically this summer, how Milwaukee could set themselves up to assure that Giannis stays in Milwaukee, and this will be an extremely important summer for Milwaukee because this will be really the only year that they have any cap space available if they choose to do so. So they really got to make sure that they get everything right this summer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously the Bucks have not been very good since 2001. They just built the new stadium. I would like to see the team do well. It's a very expensive stadium. I've been there. Keeping Giannis seems to be a very important piece of the team being successful in a small market like Milwaukee. We all love Giannis, and we want to make sure that he's staying there and the team is competitive over the next few years while we have his prime. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously losing Giannis would be a detriment to the team. They got him with the 14th pick, I believe, in an NBA draft, which was a steal. And they got, probably the best player, at least right now, maybe the front runner for MVP, but James Harden's kind of knocking on that door. But losing him would be terrible for Milwaukee. It pretty much would. I mean, if they can't keep him, it's kind of like similar to New Orleans, where if you can't keep Anthony Davis, what's the point of having a team there, right? So losing Giannis would be hard to justify a team in Milwaukee. It is a smaller market, and and without him, they don't have much of a future. So I believe the way we're going to structure this podcast is Dan isn't as big of an NBA fan as my brother and myself, but Dan's going to be asking us some questions that he has regarding Milwaukee, and we are going to be doing our best ways of answering them, what we think is best for the Bucks.
So can we start with just what is the – I can try and look it up, but what is the current cap? What are their current contracts? Who's long? Who's got a long contract? Who doesn't?
Okay, so yeah, before we go into that, I'm gonna quickly explain how the Bucks cap situation is gonna work this summer, and I'll add in how all the players are structured in their contracts. So Antetokounmpo is worth about 25, close to 26 million for next year. George Hill will be worth essentially $1 million if they choose to release him, which they most likely will, since he has an $18 million contract if they choose to accept it, which the reason why they just traded Henson and Dellavedova was to get rid of that money. Bledsoe, Middleton, Brogdon, and Lopez are all free agents, and I'll go into their cap holds in a few seconds. But other than that, they have Tony Snell locked up for 2 more years. Next year, he'll be worth about a little over $11 million. Ersan Ilyasova will be making $7 million next year. Then a bunch of young rotational players, and Thon Maker, who's making about $3.5 million next year. DJ Wilson just under $3 million. DiVincenzo just under $3 million. And a couple of non-guaranteed contracts in Pat Connaughton and Christian Wood and Sterling Brown, all at about $1.6 million. Now, Connaughton and Sterling Brown have been a part of their rotation this year. Christian Wood, not so much.
I will say Connaughton's been really getting a lot, very reduced minutes, and I'm actually happy about that. He's not looked good in his time. A lot of fouls, a lot of missed threes. Mix him above the rim plays, but I'm not sure. I'm glad they've reduced his minutes a lot. It seems like DJ's getting in there a lot more.
Yeah, DJ, now that he's back from injury, he's getting a few more probably of those minutes. So Connaughton may be expendable. He may be a player that they choose not to move past this season. But with Middleton and Brogdon, really the Bucks are pretty lucky with those two players because of the fact that they are under cheap contracts now. So even though they'll both be free agents next year, their cap holds will not be high. Essentially, they're going to be worth about 150% of their current contract, which their current salary, which for Chris Middleton it's 13, so his cap hold will be at 19.5. and Brogdon is worth at about a little less than $1.5 million, so his cap hold will be just under $2 million. And so what that means is the projected salary for next year is supposedly about $109 million. They'll decide that right before free agency.
Well, do you know how they decide that? I'm just curious. Is it based off just league-wide revenue?
Yeah, based off revenue from this past year, so that's why it doesn't get decided until the end of the year.
Okay.
And now what those cap holds essentially mean is that because of the fact that they're able to re-sign Brogdon and Middleton past the salary cap if need to be, they essentially still have cap holds on their roster, meaning that these players are technically a part of the roster unless the Bucks then decide not to re-sign them. They could say, all right, we'll release their cap hold, meaning that they get that money, but now they won't be able to re-sign Middleton over the salary cap. So basically with these cap holds now, and they have a few options of what they could do. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Bledsoe, whose cap hold will be at about $22.5 million, but even though he's a solid player for this team, he probably will be worth anywhere between $15 and $18 million if they decide to re-sign him in free agency.
Yeah, I like Bledsoe. That's a higher number than I was expecting to hear out of him, honestly.
Well, that's his cap hold, but if they resign him for less, then right away that salary starts counting in place of the cap hold. So you could resign him for about $15 to $16 million over a few years, and now his cap hold isn't as high because
would he be able to get higher on an open market? Would he take a discount on a decent team? I mean, that's tough to say how much at what point.
So his agent is Rich Paul, who is famously LeBron's agent.
Interesting.
I do not believe that Eric Bledsoe, he's still rather young. I think he'd still want to go out there and get money instead of ring chase or at least be in a situation. I think Eric Bledsoe has a very high opinion of himself, and I mean, he has reason to be. He's a good player, but I don't know necessarily, and we'll get into this more, if he's worth at least with the cap.
What do you think he's worth?
I'm not sure if Eric Bledsoe is going to take a beer and cheese hometown discount. I don't think what Milwaukee's giving him. I think we're going to have to give him money. I don't think he's going to stay for any other reason, especially if he's going with someone like Rich Paul. It sounds like someone who's got some maybe some outside of basketball interests.
Yeah, and so if we want to start this round, I don't think Eric Bledsoe is someone who is necessarily a great fit in Milwaukee. I like Malcolm Brogdon. I like what he brings to the table. I think he should be the starting point guard, and I would rather invest money in him and renounce the cap hold that Eric Bledsoe has and try to get someone who would fit better. Now we'll go into detail who I think would be a better fit, but as of right now, I would not be thinking of spending that money on Eric Bledsoe unless there's no other option.
So we're at 109 projected cap. Is that correct for next year, Danny?
Correct, yes. That is the projected cap.
Then, so Giannis, you said 25-ish?
Yeah.
Okay. So working from there, so now, we're at 84. Like, let's build this up.
Okay, so then
all right. Well,
let's do Chris Middleton, who's going to be a free agent. Now his cap hold, you said, is going to be $20 million?
Yeah, so let me give you guys the numbers real quick. So with all the players who are guaranteed under contract next year, you're at about 58.5. Add in Chris Middleton for 19.5, that's 78. Add in Brogdon for just under $2 million, that's 80 right there. So now that leaves you with about $29 million to spend. However, so for every roster spot that you have under 12, so right now, adding in all the numbers for next year, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, count it up real quick, 5, 6, 7, 8 players, including the cap holds for Malcolm Brogdon and Middleton, under contract for Milwaukee next year. So now you have to add in about $900,000, which is essentially the predicted league minimum for next year for 4 roster spots. So that means $3.5 million. So you are at about $83.6 million with 109 projected salary cap. That is 16, 25, about 25.5.
So you're saying that, and that's with Giannis, that's with Brogdon?
All of them, yeah.
That's not with Lopez yet, though.
No Lopez. Lopez we'll get into in a second.
Okay.
Yeah,
no Lopez and no
Eric Bledsoe. Yeah.
So no Bledsoe, but so yes to that'd be Middleton, Brogdon, Giannis, and then all of the
and
the
all
guys
the young
making,
guys. Yeah,
all the young guys. Okay.
Now what you could do here, now you have about $25 million spent. Now one other option to do is to stretch Tony Snell's contract. So essentially what that means is he's got 2 years remaining on his contract worth about $23.5 million for 2 years combined. You could stretch that contract over 5 years and essentially split that total up between 5 years, which goes to about $4.7 million. So right now his contract next year is at about 11.4, and the difference between 11.4 and 4.7 is 6.7, which gives you about 31.7, and essentially opens up a near maximum salary there.
But that also means that Tony Snell is not going to be on your team anymore.
Tony Snell won't be on your team. I mean, do you like Tony Snell?
Actually, he's been surprisingly solid this year. I mean, everyone was kind of crapping on him last year, but he's made some shots. He's been serviceable defensively. He was again with DJ coming back. I think he and Connaughton have sort of had some minutes reduced there a little bit, but I think he's been fine. But yeah, you don't need to keep him. I wouldn't say he's certainly not in the caliber of Middleton or Brogdon or Lopez, as far as people who I think have been really good players for the Bucks. I mean, I'm not the expert in it, but just as a casual fan who watches all the games, it's really been those guys seem to really be the straws that stir the drink.
So I just have a quick question here. Brook Lopez just signed with the Bucks this summer, and so he's been 1 year. So obviously the Bucks don't have his bird rights, so they don't have a cap hold.
Right? They do have a cap hold. So here's the two options the Bucks will have with Lopez. Is essentially they could go over the cap to re-sign him, meaning they'd have to dip into that 25 remaining that they have left, or 31. I mean, like another thing they could do going a little back is trade Ersan Ilyasova, who's got $7 million. I don't know if any team will take him or not. I mean, he's serviceable. I'm sure someone would take him on. So that's another way they could open it up. But yeah, so Brook Lopez, you could essentially go over and re-sign him. But depending on how much he's worth, you could he has a cap hold, but he could only sign for 120% of his this year's salary. So that would be just over $4 million, or they could decide to use their room exception, meaning that they had salary cap room. Now they've gone over their salary cap by re-signing everyone, signing a free agent. They still have a room exception, which is about $4.5 million, projected to be $4.5 million for next year, which is obviously the higher total, which that's something they could do with Brook Lopez, dependent on the market out there.
I'm curious your guys' opinion. Is Brook Lopez a guy that the Bucks should really prioritize to re-sign?
Yes.
I mean, it's pretty obvious to me. I just want to make sure that I'm not...
Depending on the price. Here. I think if it's a 4.5 for a room exception, yes. Even for $6-7 million, yes. I think he's definitely worth that. I mean, I don't think he'll want any more. He understands his age. He understands his limitations, I think, at this point. I mean, he only signed for about $3.5 million this past season. So I think the room exception is a reasonable thing to consider here. So I think we could throw that in that Brook Lopez resigns with the room exception once everyone else resigns with the team.
And I'm in agreement here. Brook Lopez he's shooting about 37% from three, which really opens up the offense for the team, especially around Giannis. And then the other thing is, I mean, he's 7th in blocks, and he's only playing 27 minutes a game. So I'm sure that number would go up a little bit if he went per 36-minute stats. So he's a good defender. At least he can defend, protect the rim a little bit. In the way I see it, he's a good fit. You want to keep him.
All right. So now let's say we have either the $25 million available here. There's a lot of options with this 25. Obviously, like we said, you could trade away Ersan Ilyasova. You could stretch out Tony Snell's contract, or you could just keep both players. Keep this here $25 million. What do we want to do? We go first.
Well, actually, when you say stretch out Tony Snell's contract, is that essentially buying him out and then just taking the hit over 5 years? So just cutting him. Yeah. Like obviously, you still have to pay the money, and you stretch that out.
And that's the thing. You still have to pay the money. Sure. So now they'd be close to paying the luxury tax, which I don't know if Milwaukee, being a small market team, wants to do. So
I will say it's that's one thing I was going to bring up. I don't think this is a team that's going to want to pay the luxury tax.
Yeah. So
very often, only in a year in which they are truly competitive, like. I really, this is not going to be a team that's going to live in the luxury tax land.
Well, and that's kind of what would hurt. That's what kind of would make the stretching Tony Snell's contract pretty difficult for this team, because if they do plan on keeping Giannis, they're going to obviously have to probably pay him the Supermax, his next contract.
Sure, that's 40-ish?
No, it's probably going to be a little more, because the cap's supposed to go up in the next 2 years.
Is that calculated as a percentage of the total?
35% of the salary cap, so it'll probably be even a little more than 40, yeah.
But that's not the Supermax, right? It's not the 40%?
Wait, what? There's a
No, there is no Supermax.
But isn't that, like, if you've been 10 years in the league?
No, they don't have that, no.
Oh, that, okay.
No.
I thought, okay. So, he will obviously be eligible for the Supermax, and he obviously...
But not the Supermax?
I thought there was.
No. But he's only been in the league 8-9 years anyway, so he wouldn't go he wouldn't qualify.
That was my
anyway,
question. Yeah, okay. So anyway,
at that point, I should say.
And then to the point I was trying to make, you're obviously going to have